This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
Let's talk about the word that won't die. Appeal. Every time a high-profile case wraps up, especially one where the killer skips trial and pleads guilty, it's the same chorus. Can he appeal? What if there's new evidence? Can he still get out? And it's a fair question. In a system that's as slippery as is slow, but in the case of Bryan Kohberger, it's time to clear the fog and torch the conspiracy theories. Because here's the truth, and it might be a little less dramatic than some people want. When you plead guilty, you're not just saying, I did it. You're also saying, I waive my right to fight this later. And that changes everything. In this segment, defense attorney and Defense Diaries host Bob Motta lays out, with zero sugarcoating, what's going on here. If you're expecting some sneaky legal backdoor where Kohberger slithers out of prison and vanishes into the night, prepare to be disappointed. We're not dealing with wrongful conviction territory. We're not dancing around a shady mistrial. This is a man who admitted guilt in court on record and waived his right to appeal as part of the deal. Bob also walks us through the mechanics of what could happen in theory post-conviction, relief petitions, ineffective assistance claims, newly discovered evidence, and why none of those hold any real water in this case. He's seen every angle of this from both the courtroom and the human side, and let's just say he's not buying the Reddit-level fantasy scenarios. But this conversation goes deeper than just legal language. We'll dive into the psychology behind the plea, not just Kohberger's, but what likely happened behind the scenes with his attorney, Ann Taylor. What conversations were had? Was there ever a come-to-Jesus moment? Or was it just the crushing weight of evidence finally hitting a guy who thought he could outsmart the system? We also get into Idaho's lack of an insanity defense. What that really means and why mental illness, while certainly real, doesn't magically explain away murder. And I think it's important to state he did not claim he had a mental illness. Asperger's is not a mental illness. Autism spectrum disorder is not a mental illness. If you're wondering how Kohberger's defenders are spinning this, well, Bob's got thoughts on that too. So let's get real. If Bryan Kohberger ever walks free, it won't be because of a legal loophole. It'll be because reality left the building. Let's break it down. I think your odds, if I were a betting man and to go, what's the better odds of him dying faster? Going to prison or waiting on death row? I'm going to go with going to prison.
Prison justice, man. That's not a joke, bro.
I don't give him 5 years, quite honestly. I think he's going to go out faster than Dahmer. What I was, I guess, a little surprised by was the sheer amounts of calls for people in prison to kill him and violate him in these statements. I applauded. I thought it was wonderful. I'm like, this is great, because I wonder how much Kohberger thinks about those things or fears those sort of things or cares about those sort of things. I don't know, but
it'll depend on where they plop him in there, right? I can't imagine that he'll be in Gen Pop. If he's in Gen Pop, he's not going to last long.
At least not right away.
Right.
Yeah.
They typically put these guys, they have their own wing of the worst of the worst. I don't know that he'll be getting rec time with the rest of the guys in there. If he does, I mean, because they tried to take out Gacy too. Like Gacy very early on in his sentence, like somebody tried to kill him with a fork.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like there are rules in prison, and there are certain offenders that when they get in there, they are made to understand right away. You're short time in here, dude. Like we don't mess with your kind in here. Anybody that befalls like harm to children, they typically just don't survive.
Yeah. I would not be surprised if this if it ends early for him, and that would be lovely.
Sure.
Speaking earlier, we're talking about the appeals. Obviously, he can't appeal. They can file the notice that they explain this to me. You're the attorney, because there's a lot of concern out there about, could he ever get an appeal? I know he can't technically, but crazier things have happened. There's people that have been sentenced to life, no possibility of parole, blah, 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 blah. And somehow, they're out. Is there any chance in this case? Can you give us some insight there?
No, they're like, if people are, I knew I was going to start getting a lot of questions when Hitler said it during, when he was imposing the sentence, and that's just boilerplate language in terms of your appellate rights. You got to get that notice filed. Could he theoretically come up with a direct appeal wherein he's trying to establish ineffective assistance of counsel by stating that he was, misinformed or was not represented properly by Ann Taylor? Maybe, it'll go nowhere. It'll be rejected nearly immediately because of the waiver.
Mm-hmm.
Down the road, could he potentially file a post-conviction relief act petition or whatever the equivalent is in Idaho? Theoretically, but for that, again, you're living in the world of ineffective assistance of counsel and or newly discovered evidence. Like, those are the things that typically, in a typical case where a defendant has not waived their appellate rights and they go through the process and they've failed at the appellate on direct appeal, and then you appeal that decision, and then you appeal it up once more once that gets affirmed, and then once the state Supreme Court shuts you down, at that point, then you start looking into, and you don't even have to wait for post-conviction relief act stuff, because that's where you bring in, and a lot of people are always confused about appeals. Like, that's like, you don't bring in newly discovered evidence in an appeal saying, oh, look what we discovered after the trial was over, so we're appealing it. No, that's, the appeals deal only with the issues of pretrial and trial. That's it, direct appeal. Post-conviction petitions is where you deal with newly discovered stuff. They're civil in nature. It's done, and ultimately it ends up in the trial court, the very trial court. But I don't anticipate in this situation that's ever going to happen. I roundly reject this concept that Kohberger's mindset was, oh, I'm just going to plead this out to take the pressure of the trial off me so that I can prepare my appeals. Like that, whenever I hear people say it, I'm snickering in my head because it's absurd. It's patently absurd.
Well, I mean,
it's not happening. The guy would have 20 years to appeal shit on a death penalty case.
Well, and the thing is, this is not a case where, he's still saying he's innocent. He's flat out admitted guilt. So it's not like he was found guilty after a trial.
Right.
He's admitted guilt. I mean, I would imagine that makes it a hell of a lot more difficult, too, if you're going to try and appeal something you admitted guilt to, and then we're sentenced for.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing, there's a dynamic in Idaho that you always have to kind of account for. And it's the fact that they don't have the insanity defense there.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot use the insanity defense. I've talked about it a lot when we covered Lori Vallow's case. They have a carve out, like a small carve out, wherein you could challenge the mens rea portion of a statute, which means that you're saying that, okay, because of this person's mental state, they were incapable of knowing that they were committing a crime. Like, I always gave the example of, like, if Lori Vallow actually believed that her kids were demons and that they weren't human beings, because part of the statute, the homicide statute, is that you're taking the life of another human being without just cause, right? So that you have to prove, that's why you see these proof of life witnesses in every trial that you'll see that's a murder trial. You have to prove that they were an actual person alive on this planet. They call that proof of life. You see the proof of death typically through the medical examiner and cops, but usually the ME comes in and they talk about the cause of death. And so in that very narrow circumstance, you can bring up a mental disease or defect in Idaho, only to say that the person could not have uh, fulfilled that aspect of the statute, the mens rea, the mental part of the statute, because they weren't able to tell that what was reality and what was not. Which is obviously a tough thing to do in terms of trying to prove it in a court of law. Like
Mhm.
people that have never dealt with somebody that has gone through either psychosis or paranoid schizophrenia, where that shit is so vivid for these people that it's true to them. You know what I mean? Those things exist in the world. Mental illness is a real thing. But it's very, very difficult for people to really kind of come to grips with things that they just don't understand because it seems implausible. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like that part of it in terms of, but you're really kind of attacking the lack of the ability to bring that defense on a much grander scale. Because at the end of the day, if that was allowable, I don't know that Kohberger would have allowed for it. Like I was always of the mindset that Lori Vallow would have no part of it. She
Mhm.
wasn't like, I'm not the crazy one. You fucks are the crazy one. You guys don't believe. Like we're telling you, end of days is all her bullshit. And like, but I think that like she believes it. Like I
Yeah.
still, when I watch that unhinged crazy woman, and like the fact that she can sit in a court of law and talk about these crimes and represent herself somewhat capably
Mhm.
doesn't mean that she's not batshit crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Because
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
everybody thinks that if like you're mentally ill, that you have to be frothing at the mouth and walking around like a drooling,
Yeah.
sweating. Like that's not what it means,
If
man. I
only
mean,
everyone who was crazy acted like that, it would
it
make
would be
them
so
much
much
easier.
easier.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be so evident. We're like, look at him. He's frothing at the mouth. Like that guy's
Exactly.
clearly insane.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would make our lives way, way easier. Just not the case.
They're frothing. Oh, it's another one.
Well,
Another.
I mean,
Maybe
come
this one's
on. You
rabies,
just
though.
had. Yeah,
What
exactly.
do you think was going on? Let me back up here a little bit. With the Kohberger team going to the state and saying, "Okay, we want to look at doing a plea deal here at the last minute." Um, how long was it that Ann Taylor had direct knowledge that Kohberger was guilty? Is this something where towards the end he said, "I'll take the plea because I did it"? I mean, how does that work on the back end? Like what was
I
going
mean,
on in those conversations?
it's hard to say,
Yeah.
because I mean, and it interestingly, Thompson brought it up, that at some point Ann Taylor was sitting in open court saying my client's factually innocent. He brought that up,
Yeah, yeah.
which I thought was unusual, but like you're going through the evidence as the attorney, and you have this weird dichotomy because you've got a client who I'm sure Kohberger initially was saying that I didn't do this. I'm innocent. And as an attorney for the defense, you have to accept what your client is saying to you as their truth. And then when the discovery starts coming in, that's when you sit down and you say, all right, well, you're telling me this, but this is the evidence that they've been able to gather against you.
Mhm.
And I'm here to tell you that we've got some real problems. We've got this sheath that, we'll do everything that we can to try to get it booted and barred from being entered into evidence. But, I don't want you, holding your hopes up. It's like,
Mhm.
so you try to go through with your clients and what the evidence is and whether or not Bryan Kohberger at some point was like, you know what? I did this. I doubt highly. I think it was more a situation wherein Ann Taylor went to her client and said, look, at this point, I feel pretty strongly that you're going to be convicted on this.
Mhm.
They have evidence. It's powerful. You've seen the way that we've been able to challenge it in terms of our motion work. We've tried to have things suppressed. That was not successful. Those are the motions that we needed to file. When they're not successful, that means that evidence is coming in. And when they start presenting all this evidence, Bryan, I think the likely result is going to be they're going to find you guilty of these crimes. And then, you switch the conversation to the death penalty aspect of it, which had this gone to trial, the death penalty phase would have been in a whole nother trial.
Yeah.
And she was doing everything that she's required to do as his attorney in terms of his autism, and saying that the death penalty is akin to cruel and unusual punishment because of his mental disabilities and things like that. And that would have all come out. And, he wasn't successful in those motions either. And, she says, look, the way this thing's going to shake out is you're going to be found guilty, and they're going to give you the death penalty. Like, that's my honest opinion as your attorney. I think that that's where this road is leading. Do you, based on what I've just told you, do you want me to go to see if they'll make a plea agreement, if they'll drop the death penalty in exchange for you pleading guilty and agreeing to, 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole? Like, it had to have been that conversation because he did it, meaning he pled out, right? So, like, I don't think there was ever a coming to Jesus moment for Bryan Kohberger where he just spilled his guts to Ann Taylor, and she's like, oh shit, well, I got to go plead you out.
Yeah.
It's like, and if it did, we'll never know because of attorney-client privilege. But I happen to think it's probably the other way, whereas she just said, look, we did everything we could. We filed everything we could. Nothing is getting suppressed. All of this evidence is coming in, and it's damning. And no one's going to believe that you were driving around stargazing at 4 a.m. No one's going to believe it.
Yeah.
No one's going to believe that it's just happenstance that your phone happens to be in airplane mode or turned off during the times of the commission of these crimes. No one's going to believe it. They are going to believe that you came and drove by the house the following morning at 9:00 for reasons unknown. They're going to believe that because the GPS puts you there. So it's like, it was a powerful case. It just was. Like I don't even listen to the pro burgers because, like, their shit doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you stare at something long enough, you can make it to whatever you want it to be.
Sure.
But that doesn't change the facts of what we know. And nothing will ever change the fact that this dude left a sheath with his indisputable single source DNA under the body of 2 beautiful girls. And there's no explanation that's reasonable for it. There's no explanation that a jury ever would have bought. And that alone would have put him down. Like, that was it. So, you go to him, and like I said, you say, look, man, this is, we're going to talk turkey here. This isn't a magic show. There's no silver tongue bullshit that's going to go on, and we're not going to get, a not guilty on this thing because, your alibi, if that's what you want to call it, sucks. And you left the sheath with your DNA under 2 of the girls.
So there it is, laid bare with no legal fairy dust, no social media wish casting, no room for the kind of delusional optimism you only find on YouTube comment sections. Bryan Kohberger pled guilty. He waived his right to appeal, and no, there's not some secret plan B waiting in the wings to undo all of it. But Bob Motta did here, and this is why his voice is helping us cut through the noise on the legal end of this, is it stripping away the myth-making. In true crime, people love a twist ending. They crave that silver uncertainty, good or bad. But in this case, the facts are the facts. Kohberger left his DNA on a knife sheath under the bodies of 2 murdered young women. It's not ambiguous. This is not circumstantial. This is case closed level evidence. And every legal option on earth was exhausted trying to suppress it, and they failed. What's more telling is what likely happened behind closed doors. This wasn't some dramatic courtroom meltdown of sudden outburst of conscience. This was an attorney, a seasoned one, sitting down with a client saying, "Where are the moves? It's time to deal." And for all the pro-Kohberger folks still clinging to some narrative of innocence, this part matters. He knew the evidence was real. He wasn't framed. He wasn't railroaded. He folded because the truth backed him into a corner, and he didn't want to die. Although, surprise, Bryan, you're chosen a sentence that's going to be far worse than death and will eventually lead to it. And yet the system's imperfections still haunt people. We've seen monsters get out before. We've seen justice stall, buckle, even reverse. So the fear, it's not irrational. This isn't one of those stories. There's no constitutional loophole big enough to drag this case back into daylight. What's maybe the most sobering is that even with the plea, Kohberger's name and his pain will still echo through the legal system for decades. Appeals may be off the table, but post-conviction filings, motions, procedural noise, that stuff will come. And every time it does, the families will be forced to remember, refeel, and relive. But here's what we won't have to fear, that he walks free. This wasn't a justice system failure. This was a system working the way it's supposed to when a mountain of evidence meets the cold reality of guilt. As Bob said, no one's buying the "I was just stargazing at 4 a.m. excuse. Not then, not now, not ever." Tell me what you think in the comments section on YouTube. And if you're not on YouTube yet and you're on our podcast platforms on Apple Podcasts or wherever it may be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. You can watch us do the show. You can interact in the comments section. We do greatly appreciate that. There's extras there as well. Just search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. And reverse, if you're looking for us on the podcast platform so you can take us on the go, just search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi and you'll find us there as well. We do appreciate that. Let us know what you think, like I said, in the comments section. Until next time, for all of us here, I'm Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.